I
Thank
think
you.
it's okay now. Thank you very much, Sandeep. So yeah, this webinar is held by Sandspark Guts. We are an incubator for high-tech startups based in Austria, and we are operating for over 2 decades. Our core focus lies in running 2 incubation programs. One is open to various industries, and the other one is dedicated to startups connected to the space sector under the European Space Agency Business Incubation Program. Your presenter for today is going to be my colleague, Sandra Hinteregger, who holds a PhD in Business Administration from the University of Graz, specializing in controlling, auditing, finance, and accounting. In addition to managing our finances, Sandra also advises our startups and SMEs on finance-related matters throughout the incubation process. As you know, of course, from the previous sessions, all webinars are being recorded and they are going to take approximately around 40-45 minutes. And the rest of the time will be reserved for your questions and discussions. If you prefer, you can also post the questions straight in the chat and we will discuss them in the end. And with this said, I will hand it over to Sandra and I wish you a nice workshop.
Thank you so much, Edin. Welcome to the Business Planning and Financial Essentials workshop. In this session, we will first discuss the key elements for business planning, and we'll then take a look at the information needed to forecast your financials, whereby we focus first on the cost side of your business and later on the revenue side. So our goals for today are that we first look at the business planning and the key elements we need for it, and then focus on the financial part and discuss what will be your main costs, how long will it take you to reach the break-even point, so the point where costs equal revenue, such that from this point onwards you can start generating profit. How will you cover your costs until you reach this point? How can you forecast your revenue and sales volume? And then with regard to this also, when will you scale up? When will you reach your growth inflection point? And what in the case of your business could be your growth inflection point? Yeah, as you probably know, 90% of all startups fail. And the main reason why startups fail is that there is no market need for the solution they offer. So the #1 goal should be to solve a meaningful problem for other people. And many other explanations why they fail are linked to money and finance, as we see it here. For instance, startups failed because they ran out of cash, did not have the right team, probably also because they were not able to afford the experts they would have needed, get out-competed, have pricing or cost issues, or for instance, poor marketing. And therefore, we also want to take a closer look on the financial essentials when planning our business today. You already got introduced to the business model and the business model canvas, and we learned that the business model describes how the business is built and how its structure creates value. The business plan describes how the business generates profits and intends to succeed. A good business model with a good business plan can ensure success, while a poor business model with a poor business plan can lead to months or even years of misery. So it's really very important. Yeah, the key elements for business planning are, of course, first of all, the product or service you want to offer to your customers, the unique selling proposition of your product or service, the competitive advantages you have. Very important also the IP strategy. You want to focus on your timeline for the product and service, your technology readiness level, and your pricing decision. Then, of course, it's also very important to define your market. This is normally done with the sum model, where we also will have a closer look on later on. Then it's, of course, also very important to be informed about trends within this market. to focus on your target groups, think about segmentation, competitors, and your market positioning. We also have to think about marketing and sales. So how do you plan to attract your customers and to raise their awareness, and which channels would you like to use, which of course also depends on the type of business you are in. Then with regard to company and management, it's of course important to think about when and where do you want to found your company, which legal form do you choose. This of course also depends on the risk you're willing to take with your company. And then also to think about your management team, the employees you will need, and also advisors, mentors, investors, and other people who could support you with your business idea. Then I also put in here the very important sustainability section, as within In Transit, a green or sustainable and digital transition is the goal. So you also should think about if your solution has any negative impact on one or more of the SDGs or the European Green Deal, and how you will contribute to a sustainable development with your business operations. And then finally, what we also would like to do today is, of course, to think about your financials. So how do you plan to finance your business operations? What are your founding costs? How do you fund your business? How much money do you need, for instance, for your first prototype? How does your revenue forecast look like? So when do you plan to start making revenues? And so on. And if you write all this information into your business plan, then at the beginning you have your executive summary, which is a condensed summary of all these points. And today we want to focus especially on this financials part. The business model canvas is the model to shape your business model and maybe to adapt it before you write your whole business plan. You already got to know this and had a detailed look at this upper part. So the resources you need on the left side and how value gets created on the right side. And to have knowledge about this is a requirement for financial forecasting. So all these informations are like your key ingredients for financial forecasting. And today we focus on the costs we have to incur in order to run a business, like for instance, the production resources we need, customer acquisition costs, employees, licenses and patents, and the distribution channels we want to use. And on the other hand, on the revenues which are generated, and therefore we also need to know how to determine our price, what is our market, and what are our customers willing to pay. So what we want to think about today with regard to your financial planning is, how is your business going to expand in the next years, and how will you make sure that you get the money you need in order to cover your costs? And therefore we need to get an impression of the costs you have to incur in order to set up and grow your business. These costs then will of course also change over time. And we need to think about how to finance these costs, because especially in the beginning, everything needs to be developed and you have to bear costs, while it will take some time until you're able to generate revenue. So also if you show your financial data, for instance, and it looks like this in the beginning, such that you only have costs and generate the operating loss, this is of course totally normal in the beginning. However, you always have to be able to explain how you want to finance these costs, especially in the beginning. And possibilities are, for example, public funding, which is available on an EU level, and also depending on the country you want to operate in, there are different options on national levels. Then another possibility, also, especially in the beginning, could, for instance, be family, friends, and fools. Loans is probably a bit hard for a young company, but there are also other options to work together with banks, like, for instance, sale and leaseback for equipment. And then there are, of course, also venture capitalists and angel investors. As we all know, if we generate enough revenue to cover all our costs, then we are able to make a profit. Otherwise, we make a loss. And we want to take a closer look at these two ingredients today. So in order to determine our revenue, we need to forecast the sales volume, decide about the price, and about the margin we want to earn when we sell our product or service. With regard to costs, depending on the type of the business, probably in the beginning, we have to make a few investments, and we distinguish our costs in general between variable and fixed costs. Just as a quick wrap up, if anybody, probably quickly wants to explain it to us, does anybody know the difference between variable and fixed costs and can explain it quickly to us? Okay, yeah, so while variable costs are directly related to your product or service, so they increase and decrease with production and sales volume, such that if you don't produce or don't provide the service, these costs do not exist. But if you do, they change according to your production or sales volume, like for instance, raw materials or packaging. Fixed costs are not directly related to the product and do not change with your production or sales volume, like for instance, the rent for your office or insurance contracts, phone and internet contracts, the salaries of your employees, and so on. Okay, and now I would like to ask you to brainstorm in a word cloud which costs you have to consider to run your company. And I put you a Menti link in the chat and would just ask you to brainstorm here a bit what in the case of your business are relevant cost categories you have to consider within your calculations. Okay, great. I already see a lot of input here already. So as we see here, relevant costs are, for instance, costs for patents, equipment, of course, depending on the business. When I'm a service provider, then probably less. When I'm a producing company, then I will need more investments, like for instance, also machines. We see here costs for research and development, transport costs, costs for material, R&D costs, costs for tools, staff costs, salaries. Great, super. So as we see here, there are quite a lot of different cost categories, which depending on the type of your business, also depending on whether you're producing or service providing, need to be considered. And you already mentioned the most important ones here. Thank you so much. So I also put here again the description of fixed and variable costs here, and we see fixed and variable costs together give our total costs, and also a graphical representation once again, where we see while the fixed costs do not change with the number of units sold, the variable costs do, not necessarily linear as we have it here. But if we think, for instance, about raw materials, then it will be the case to some extent. And now again, a question. Probably somebody wants to unmute, or you write it in the chat. What do you think is better, having more fixed or more variable costs? Which cost type presents more risk, and which costs are easier to control? Any ideas? Okay, I see here fixed in the chat, exactly. So fixed costs, of course, present more risk. Why? Because we have our insurance contracts, contracts for phone or internet, the salaries of our employees. And of course, we have to pay them no matter if we are able to produce or sell something or not. While, of course, fixed costs are easier to control because we have the contracts, we know on a monthly basis how much we have to pay. While for variable costs like raw materials, we know that they are not always stable. They can fluctuate over time and are therefore not that easy to control. Super. Thank you so much for your comments in the chat. And now I also want to discuss two very important cost categories where we see that often misunderstanding happens, and therefore we just want to make you aware of a few things. So with regard to personnel costs, it's very important that you consider that personnel costs are not only the gross wages you pay to your employees. Yeah, personnel costs consist of the gross wages, and then on top of it, you normally have to pay non-wage labor costs consisting of social security, employee pension funds, and taxes. And then probably, depending on the country you operate in, there might also be some special payments which need to be considered in here. Another thing I want to raise your awareness on is, depending on the country you operate in, please check for the gross wages of your employees if there are any legal minimum thresholds specified for the gross wages. And one other thing which is important for the calculation of your personnel costs, especially if you, for instance, apply for funding, is to check always if there are maximum salaries specified from the funding bodies, like, for instance, maximum hourly rates. Okay, and another cost category I want to discuss with you are marketing and sales costs. And here it's very important to think thoroughly about what you think this will cost for you. With regard to marketing, under-marketing is a big problem because marketing informs people that your company and your product or service exists. And if people don't know that your company and your service exists, you also won't be able to attract people who support you, and you won't be able to find customers. So it's really important to calculate enough here within your personnel costs. And of course, when you think about which channels you will use in order to reach your customers, as we said before, this will of course depend on the business you're in. So if you're in a B2C market, then probably things like social media marketing, campaigns for the product launch, or newsletters might work. While within a B2B market, other things with a more personal connection might be more successful, like attending and organizing events, networking, or fairs and exhibitions. And it's very important to consider that you will need to employ a marketing and a sales expert. And as a rule of thumb, we always tell our startups that approximately 30% of your total costs should be marketing costs. And then, of course, also sales is very important, because if people know that your company and your product or service exists, you still need someone who makes the people who are interested in your company to real customers who really buy your product by showing it to them, explaining it, talking about prices and conditions, and so on. And please consider that you should at least calculate one marketing and one sales expert per market or region you want to operate in within your personnel costs. Okay. Then I would like to switch the side and to think about how to forecast the revenue. And as Paul Sappho said, the goal of forecasting is not to predict the future, but to tell you what you need to know to take meaningful action in the present. So of course, there are always ups and downs, but it's important to make it able for you to react accordingly within a short period of time. And therefore, you need a benchmark. You need to know what is your goal to see whether you're deviating from the plan. When we start forecasting, we need to ask ourselves a few questions, namely, who is my customer? So what do they like? Where are they located? What are their characteristics like age and so on? What is my market? So how big is it? Where is it located? And what are the trends within this market? And to check whether you're prepared for the market. So we have to ask ourselves, what is my business model? The price, how do I plan to enter the market, and how many people do I need to fulfill my business idea? In order to start with forecasting, we need to make a few assumptions. We need to define the market in general, your market share, the geographical expansion, your sales volume, and the employees you think you will need. And for others, like for instance, for investors, it's important to know what are the underlying assumptions behind your numbers and why do you assume certain things? And are these assumptions realistic? So you always need to be able to explain the assumptions you make here and to be aware that these assumptions are interrelated. So if you change one, this may also have an effect on the others. Okay, so when we talk about our revenue, we need to think about two things, right? First, the price and also the sales volume. And we start with determining the price. So what is the basis for our pricing decision? What is normally our goal? Yeah, we want to make a profit. So what we need to do via our price is to cover our total costs, right? So the basis for the price of our product is the total cost of the product. And we can calculate this as follows. We take a look at the material costs. So if you manufacture products, these costs will be fairly straightforward, because then these are costs for materials, parts, and so on. And even if you only release digital products, as in the case of software and mobile apps, your material costs may still include things like stock photography, licensing fees, and other expenses. Then we have the labor and production costs. And here it's essential that you know exactly how much time goes into creating each of your products and how you value that time. So if you produce it yourself, you need to know how long does it take you to create each piece and what is your hourly rate you need to earn as a living wage or the hourly rate you have to consider for your employees. This will prevent you from setting your prices so low that you can't afford to live or to pay your employees. And basically, this is also production cost in general. So of course, also we have to think about the machine time that goes into creating each of the products and how you value this machine time. And then we also need to consider the overhead costs. And depending on the scale of your business, this could include anything from web hosting and cell phone service to office space rental, electricity, and furniture purchases. And these costs are not directly related to your product or service, but they are still there and need to be covered via the price. But are the costs the only thing we need to consider when we determine our price? Normally not. There are also other considerations we have to take into account, like for instance, what customers are willing to pay, what our competitors charge for the products, and so on. And therefore also different pricing strategies exist. The easiest one is the cost plus pricing, which means simply calculating your cost per product, as we just saw it, and then adding a markup. Competitive pricing means setting a price based on what the competition charges, and value-based pricing, setting a price based on how much the customer believes what you are selling is worth. Then we have here premium pricing, which means we set a high price to reflect the exclusiveness of the product. And this is normally what premium brands in the fashion and tech industry do. And then we see here also two more advanced pricing strategies, namely the penetration pricing and price skimming. And here penetration price means that we set a low price to enter a competitive market and then raise the price later on. An example for this would, for instance, be banks, which offer you a free account for the first 6 or 12 months and then start charging a fee afterwards. Or this is also what streaming providers like Netflix, Disney Plus, and so on did. They also, when they started, offered free trial months, or some of them I think still do. And then if you wanted to continue using the service, they started charging a fee. And price skimming means that you set a high price at the beginning and then lower it as the market evolves. And this is a very common strategy for electronic products. So like, for instance, also PlayStation or Apple do it. They set a high price during the initial launch period. And then after competitors launch rival products, they lower the price to retain a competitive advantage. Okay, so when we have thought about the costs for our business and the price for our product or service, we can already start doing some analysis, thinking about the profitability of our products or the company as a whole. And the first one I want to take a look with you at is the contribution margin. What is a contribution margin? The contribution margin tells you how much your products contribute to covering your fixed costs. And once the contribution margin has fully covered the fixed costs, a company can turn profitable. How do we calculate this? We take the price of the product or the revenue, subtract the variable costs, and what we get is the contribution margin. And it's very important that this contribution margin is always positive, because otherwise you lose money with every product you sell, as the revenue you get for a product then is not even enough to cover the variable costs, so the direct costs needed to produce and sell the product. If you calculate this, for instance, as a whole for your company, start with the revenue the company achieves, and then subtract the fixed costs from the contribution margin, and still a positive amount remains, then we're able to generate a profit and otherwise a loss. And you can calculate this per product line, or in total for the whole company. If you, for instance, have more than one product, as we see it here, we have 3 different product lines. You can compare these contribution margins and see which one contributes more or less to covering your fixed costs, so which one is more or less profitable for you. And if you then sum this up to a total contribution margin and subtract the total fixed cost of the company, you see whether you're able to make a profit or if you make a loss. The other analysis I want to take a look at with you is the break-even analysis. So if we take a look at our total costs and our revenue, the break-even point is the point where the costs equal the revenue, such that the company at this point neither makes a profit nor a loss. So if we sell this amount of units, we make neither a profit nor a loss. In our example here, we produce sweaters from organic and reused materials. We see we have here fixed costs of 5,000 euros. They include the equipment like knitting and printing machines and the salary for the employee who does all the design and production. Our variable costs here are 30 euros per sweater. And this includes the organic materials we need to buy, like wool and recycled fibers and the sustainable packaging. And the price per sweater is 50 euros. So this means for this sweater business we have here, you need to see, as we see it here, 250 sweaters to break even. And then with every piece you sell from this point onwards, you generate profit. So if we sell 1 unit more from this point onwards, we get into the profit zone. Can anyone tell me or write in the chat, how much do you earn with 1 sweater more from this point onward? So if we have 250 and we're break even and we sell 1 sweater more, we earn the contribution margin, which is in our case, price 50 euros minus variable costs 30 euros, 20 euros. Okay. And then also let's take a look at how to forecast sales volumes. At the beginning of your journey, it might probably feel a bit like guessing your sales numbers, but as a business owner or sales leader, you're in the best position to make this educated guess. And their model to define your market and to assess your market share and hence to estimate your sales volume is the TAM-SUM model. TAM means total addressable market. So this is the entire potential market independently from your ability to reach and serve it yet. The SUM is the serviceable addressable market. So the people you can actually serve and reach with your business. And the SUM is the serviceable obtainable market. So your share of the market that you think you can capture. And here it's very important that you explain how you get from this big market number down to your specific share. So to explain why you think, for instance, that your SUM will be 10% of the market. Okay, let's look at an example of a fitness smartwatch. So in this example, the company is developing a smartwatch with advanced fitness tracking features. And this would mean here your TAM is the whole market of health-conscious people who own a smartphone, as a smartphone is a requirement for the smartwatch to function. If the startup focuses initially on the US market, the SUM reflects all the health-conscious people in the US who are likely to buy a premium fitness tracking smartwatch. And as there is competition in the market, the SUM is then the market share you reasonably expect to acquire. So for instance, 1% of the health-conscious premium fitness tracking smartwatch buyers in the US. And this SUM then is the basis for your revenue after 5 years. When you do your financial planning and want to show your numbers, for instance, to investors, your sales volume should look like this. Your planned sales volume should increase extremely strong after a period of low or moderate sales volumes at the beginning. And this is called hockey stick, as your sales and revenue shoots up sharply in a curve shaped like a hockey stick at this point. And of course, it's very interesting to know what the magic in the case of your business could be that leads to this effect. Some examples for a growth inflection point could, for instance, be that you're able to land the industry leader as a customer. So in a B2B company, for instance, that you gain an important customer, and this gives your sales volume a boost, and furthermore leads other customers to adopt your solution as well. Then proof of concept at scale means that an early adopter customer starts using your product or service and thereby validates the value proposition of your solution. You can then use this data in case studies and incorporate it in your promotional materials and thereby try to get a more rapid acceptance of your solution by additional customers. Government body approval could be required for either widespread use or even for your solution to be used at all, as it is, for instance, the case for medical products. An expert or thought leader endorsement means that the public endorsement by an industry expert or a thought leader provides validation of your solution to their audience. And if the expert's audience overlaps with your target customer base, this can pave the way for accelerated revenue. Could, for instance, also be if a famous person recommends your product. Reaching a critical cost or price point means that you, for instance, relocate your production, or you have reached a sufficient volume to achieve learning economies, for instance, through improved internal processes and well-trained employees, which enables you to break through to a lower cost and therefore also to set a lower price, which of course, again, attracts new customers. And finding a new high volume usage model was, for instance, the case for the company 3M. They wanted to develop a new sort of stronger and tougher glue, and what their scientist, Dr. Spencer Silver, discovered was a glue which retains its stickiness, but with a removable characteristic, such that it was able to peel it apart easily from attached surfaces. And although they did not know what to do with it in the beginning, they did not completely want to give up on it, and accidentally invented the Post-it, which everybody knows and uses nowadays on a daily basis. Does anyone probably know what the growth inflection point was for Airbnb? And if there are any ideas, can probably write it in the chat or unmute him or herself. No idea. Okay, so for Airbnb, the hockey stick effect happened when they started to support their clients with professional pictures from their accommodations. And these professional pictures then attracted a lot of new customers, and this highly increased the demand for the accommodations. And so also the revenue of Airbnb increased rapidly. Okay, so when you do your forecasting, it is important that you have a feeling about what can happen in the best, worst case, and to find out what might be the most realistic case for you. And while you should use the most realistic case internally for monitoring if everything is still on track, you should present something between best and realistic case to others in order to show them that you really believe in the potential of your business and to convince them to also believe in your idea and to support you. But of course, again, you must be prepared for questions regarding your underlying assumptions and explain how you would prevent the case that your startup fails if important assumptions don't come true. So what do these three cases mean? Best case means everything goes according to plan, so all the goals can be achieved and all the milestones are met. Worst case means that goals are not met or milestones are delayed. It's very important to analyze this case in order to find out what could you do if this happens to you, that some important goals or milestones are not as planned in reality, in order to think about what would your plan B be then, and how can you still continue and try to make the best out of it. And then the best case is the line in between. So to wrap it up with Alan Lakin's word, planning is bringing the future into the present so that you can do something about it now. Yeah, as you're all here within the In Transit project, I'm sure you want to do something about it now for your business and that you're really motivated, and I wish you all the best for it. And thank you so much for your attention. And I'm now ready for questions or to discuss things with you if anybody wants to mention or to add something.
Thank you, Sandra. Yeah, Marco, I think has a question, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, you're right. I'm just
Shoot,
curious
Marco.
about the best and worst case scenario. I did it in my business plan a few times ago. But after I decided not to go on with the idea of showing the best and the worst case scenario, because usually I was asked a kind of realistic one. So do you suggest that we should put anyway in our business plan the best and the worst case scenario and the realistic too?
I think it makes it makes of course sense to think through all these three scenarios for yourself in order to just be prepared for questions. But for others, it of course makes sense to explain the realistic or a mixture of realistic and best case, because of course you want to convince them and show that you really believe that what you're doing is worth it and that you really believe that this business idea can be successful.
Thank you.
But for thinking about you and throughout your whole planning process, it makes of course sense to consider all three scenarios and to probably also try to calculate your financial planning with regard to all these three scenarios in order to just get a feeling for yourself. And if you get questions, for instance, if you show the milestones you have planned for your product and then going on the market and blah, 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 winning important customers. If things don't come through as you have planned it or are delayed, what will happen then? And if you go through all these scenarios and especially also the worst case for yourself, then it's much easier to react to questions with regard to your financial plan.
So basically, an idea could be showing in the pitch deck the realistic scenario, then keeping the, let's say, back office slide, the worst and the best case scenario. So in case they ask you, you can show them that you have already thought about it and you have at least an idea.
Exactly, this would be great.
Because in my previous, 1 year ago, I developed a full business plan with the worst and the best case scenario. But after that, I was told it's too long because obviously in that case, they were too long scenarios to show.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Very welcome.
If someone else has any other question or something to discuss, feel free to do it. It can be any question related to the topic or something that maybe we might be able to assist.
I could have another question.
Shoot, Marco.
Sorry. About the labor cost, or better, the cost about your employees.
Mm-hmm.
You show us that you put in the fixed cost, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I don't remember wrong, I was told in a application that I should have considered them like variable costs.
Yeah, I mean, often for people in production, they are considered as variable costs, and of course also depending on the time horizon you are looking at, they could of course also be variable because I can hire new people or quit the contracts of people which I realize I don't need anymore. But within a short period of time, I of course cannot quit contracts immediately, but they always have a certain time period where I have to keep the person and also pay it. So depending on the time horizon, they can be seen as fixed or variable.
Because usually I put the labor cost as a fixed, I mean the employees as a fixed cost, since I need to hire them and then keep them even if my production is not going well. So that's the reason I usually consider them a fixed
This is
cost.
how you normally do it. But you know, for some people, it's usual that they, for instance, for employees within the production, that they get paid, for instance, a certain amount per unit they produce. And then this part is, of course, variable.
Thank you very much again.
Very welcome.
I promise I shut up.
No. Very welcome.
Yeah, anyone else? If there's like an issue or something that is going on within your SME that we might be able to shed some light on, feel free to discuss. I know it's also basically the time where most of the people just go back home. It's time to finish their shifts. But if that is the case, then we're not going to keep you much longer. Sandra? Well, we're not going to put pressure on them. So if there's, okay, Abraham. Thank you also. Okay, we'll close this one here since it looks like pretty much everything is clear to everyone. We would like to thank you, not just for joining our meeting, but also the previous ones. And with this webinar that we had today, we're going to close the webinars related to the Innovate call, the second Innovate call. And we are looking forward to see all of you on Thursday, I believe, with a nurturing event. I think everyone is familiar with that one also through our partners. And with that one, I would like to thank you again for showing up and wish you a great afternoon. And hopefully everything goes well at your work.
Thank you. Have a great
Thank you to everyone.
Bye-bye.
Have a great
Thank
bye-bye.
you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.